Welcome back to the Keep Going podcast with Vin Kennedy. I'm your host, Vin Kennedy. Today, we have a special guest. This is Justin. Justin, if you want to do a brief intro.
Yeah, I'm Justin Harris. I own Troponin Nutrition, teamtroponin.com, and then First Attachment Supplements. Been in the bodybuilding industry, industry for over 20 years, competed in bodybuilding and powerlifting, come from an athletic background before that. And I guess that's about it.
Yeah. So I've been following you for a little bit, and then I saw you on Mark Bell, and you kind of went into what really piqued my attention was the carb cycling. I
Uh-huh.
know that's it's kind of your bread and butter, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's kind of yeah, and it's what I've done since day one. I mean, it was just from my my educational background. I kind of stumbled on the approach myself as it just seemed most effective. You're bound by you're always bound by thermodynamics. There's only you have X number of calories that you can consume a day, and any number over that amount is going to get stored somehow in the body. Any number less than that amount is going to remove stored energy from the body. And so it seemed like to me the best way to manipulate that within those boundary conditions was carb cycling, because that allows you at particular points in time to eat more calories than you burn, but from specific macronutrients, carbohydrates, and store those calories, but store them as muscle and liver glycogen rather than store them as body fat. And then that also allows you to go in a deeper deficit and remove more stored energy from the body, but when done again in a different macronutrient ratio to increase the percentage of that that's released from body fat. So as far as I can, tell, or it seems most sensible to me that's what allows you to improve body composition most dramatically under your given, metabolic boundaries.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously all the physical benefits and then straight for your athletes. But as far as even on the day to day, I feel like mentally it could kind of be something to relieve stress on just the ordinary person, right? Because you'll have a Saturday where you could kind of allow yourself more food rather than, a Monday where you might want to dial it in a little bit more.
Yeah, just the fact I kind of look at it as people who don't stick to things in the gym, like you take like your average middle-aged person who joins the gym, they get a workout plan, and then they do that same workout plan, the same exercises. It gets boring very quickly, I mean, that it just turns into like checking boxes, getting the day over with, and it's not something you enjoy. And to me, it always felt like people I know think, or it feels like a consistent diet where you eat the same amount every day would be like, and it probably is easiest to follow, but it's also very boring because nothing, you're never looking forward to anything, nothing ever changes, and you're just checking boxes, which is some people can do that, but I don't think anyone can do that forever, and I find that with myself right now, even because my training, I'm managing 4 businesses really, and so my workouts are basically checking boxes, and it's amazing the difference that something that used to be an absolute passion of mine that I used to, like the night before a big squat workout, I would struggle to sleep because I'd be so excited. It'd be like, Christmas Eve as a child,
Right.
where now that same thing that I used to love, now when it's just checking boxes, is a thing I dread. Well, I mean, not quite dread, but it's far less enjoyable because I'm just trying to get it over with, so I don't lose too much progress or lose, gains.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And with that, how do you kind of what's your view on like cheat meals or cheat days, especially I mean with yourself, with your athletes, and then just doing it in person?
Well, you have the thing is, humans aren't robots, and a lot of people just like to, because all things being equal, if you had a robot and you just gave them food, you would pick a certain number of calories, a certain number of each specific macronutrient, a certain amount of each micronutrient, and you could devise the perfect program. And you can try to do that with a human, and humans, everyone, like especially people in the sport, they want to be like, I don't need a cheat meal. I'm, mentally tough, screw that. And most people can forever, but people don't forever, and so what I found at some point, I didn't I have cheat meals fairly regularly with my clients now, and I didn't for a long time, but what I found was that no matter what I did, there was a certain number of cheats over the course of a diet plan, and when they're unplanned, they have an absolute across the board 100% negative effect on progress. If we're expecting today to be a caloric deficit of 500 calories or 1,000 calories, and it ends up being a caloric surplus of 2,000 calories, we went from, at 1,000 calorie daily deficit, we went from being on pace to burn 2 pounds of body fat for the week to now this day we've gained more than 1/2 pound of body fat alone. I mean, it's a dramatic swing, from dropping a 1/4 pound of body fat or more to now we've gained almost over a 1/2 pound of body fat. And it wasn't planned. And you don't know always when the clients don't always admit it. You can tell usually, but they'll lie. They're embarrassed. So I found that the what could I do to avoid that and realize I'm not working with a robot, I'm working with a human. And so what I've done then is I've strategically placed cheat meals. And so on my diets, we have high carb days where we already know the day's a storage day. We're eating more calories than we burn. Now we could talk about this later if you want, but we kind of trick the thermodynamic system because we have 3 buckets of storing energy. We can store body fat, we can store carbs as muscle and liver glycogen, and we can store muscle tissue. Muscle tissue we don't get to store very much, probably at the limit of about 25 grams per day is the most rapid rate of muscle growth you can consistently maintain. We have an almost unlimited ability to store body fat, obviously. The shows like My 600-Pound Life show that. And we have a pretty good amount. The glycogen, there's a cap, there's a ceiling. Someone my size, maybe 1,000, maybe 1,200 grams of carbs. Someone my wife's size, maybe 600 to 800 grams of glycogen, maybe 600 or 700 grams, 500 or 600 grams. So that, but you have that range. And so that buffer, that carbohydrate, we can utilize that. So we deplete fat really hard on the lower carb days, and then to keep all the metabolic benefits of having a higher caloric diet, the thyroid upregulation, the energy output, the increase in metabolism, the increase in energy expenditure just in your daily activity. We add that really high carb day in as a caloric surplus. We put it on the day where or we put the macronutrients predominantly towards carbohydrates. So we do store, if we eat 1,000 calories more than we burn, we store those 1,000 calories. But if they're all from carbohydrates and we're glycogen depleted, preferentially those calories will be stored as glycogen. And so since the high day is already a storage day, we've already accepted that. What I do is then I put the cheat meal at the end of the day, which seems completely counterintuitive because you're not supposed to eat before bed, yada yada. Those things that aren't really true, that don't matter. You need to be over any given time frame. If you pick a 4-hour window and you eat less calories than you burn in that 4-hour window, you'll remove some stored energy from the body. If you do it over a 24-hour window, the same thing. If you do over a 36-hour window, it doesn't matter like time of day. You're always in a constant state of burning and losing and holding and reducing. But after a very high carbohydrate day, we ate high carbs all day. And so the lowest appetite we're going to have at any point in the week is going to be at the end of a high carb day. So that's when I put the cheat meal in. So one, we're already as a storage day, so we've already accepted that. Two, we put the cheat meal at the end of the day when our appetite's going to be lowest. And three, it's at the end of the day as the last meal. So it can't turn into a cheat day, which is another one of the big issues. Because even with a plan sheet, you have a plan sheet for breakfast, it's really tough to go back to chicken and broccoli 3 hours later. And so it's really easy to just go and just fall off the deep end and the whole day is a cheat day. Where the longer you extend it, you're just cutting into sleep, so you have to go to sleep. So you're limited in that your appetite's going to be reduced the most. We've already accepted it's a storage day, and you just don't have as much time before bed to really do anything too insane. And so that's kind of how for all my clients, they get that out of the gate. Off season, pre-contest bodybuilding, in season for sports, in season for wrestling, for MMA. We will only put boundary conditions on it if we're not able to make progress after essentially exhausting all other avenues. I hardly ever remove the cheat meal entirely, but if we aren't making progress and calories are lower than I'd like them to be for our current rate of progress on the other days, I'll start putting calorie caps on the cheat meal, 2,000 calories, 1,500, 1,200 calories, yada, yada.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems so strategically based that it's kind of like almost set you up for success.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, because it goes back to the humans aren't robots. You have to, you can write the perfect plan on paper, but that's not what steps on stage, or that's not what competes, or that's not what makes weight in MMA or makes weight for wrestling. A human makes it. So it has to go from paper to person and be executed. And so you're always making concessions.
Yeah. And we know all about human errors, definitely
Yeah.
a thing.
Yep, yep.
And what's kind of your take on like calories in versus calories out? Because I know that's obviously another big debate.
Well, I mean, it's not a debate. That's it's really not. It's because that's one of the most powerful laws of physics. And for the viewers, I have a master's in physics. I actually completed a PhD coursework for physics. I ended up leaving with my master's. It turns out it wasn't quite a passion of mine, but I've published 3 research papers in experimental atomic physics. If there's the law of conservation of energy cannot be created or destroyed. You can't, there's energy is what it is, and we're just moving it around. And that is, every physicist alive has tried to disprove that and dreams of disproving it, because the moment you can disprove it and create free energy, you are instantaneously the Nobel Prize winner and the world's first trillionaire, because big oil, big gas, all those things disappear because I can just snap my fingers and create energy. And that's what calories in, calories out is. Calorie is just a measure of energy. It's the amount of energy to raise 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius, and that's a lowercase c calorie. We use kilocalories, which is 1,000 times that amount. But that's all a calorie is. It's a measure of energy. So you cannot. So if you eat X units of energy, and you burn X plus 2 units of energy, you lose those 2 units of energy from the body. And it's really, I know why it's confusing, because we tend to measure our energy storage as body weight, where 70% of our body is water, and then only about, we're basically manipulating body fat with calories in versus calories out. And for most people, 15% of our body is fat. So we're stepping on a scale and measuring 15% of our weight and deciding that's what's going on. It'd be like if the only way we could tell if our car was low on gas was by weighing it, and you have kids in the car, you have luggage, the car, all these things, you got a trailer in the back, and then you're trying to guess how much gas you have. But, you could, because no one would say calories in, calories out doesn't work for gasoline, because you can measure gasoline in terms of calories, it's same, it's a measure of energy. So no one would say, well, I put 23 gallons of gas in, but I burned 40 gallons of gas, and I still have 10 gallons left. No one, that sounds absurd, but because, but you could, if you did the weight thing, if you said, well, I put 20 gallons of gas in, I drove a lot of miles, but now I got 4 kids in the back, they all have luggage, and now my car weighs the same as it did before. So I must, I just store it. I don't know, that's
Yeah.
kind of what you're doing with calories in versus calories out, but you can't, it's undeniable. And so much so that if you could deny it, and it hurts me when people try to, because they don't realize what they're saying. You're saying you're giving free energy. We don't, oil companies, energy companies, battery power, electric vehicles, all those things, none of that matters. Because if calories in, calories out doesn't work, whoever can create that, they just go like that, and boom, light, the house is lit. We don't pay for fuel. We don't pay for anything. I'm the richest human that will ever exist, because I have all the energy at the snap of a finger, that I can just create, which you can't do. Some of the other things that can kind of make it seem that way is that the calories go through processes in the body. So let's, like if we eat 100 calories of fat, the end result is different than 100 calories of protein. And that's where it can get a little bit confusing. And then there's also the fact that the food labels only have to be accurate within about a 20% range, so you have some variance there. But if I eat 100 calories of protein, the first thing that happens, I can't absorb protein. Proteins don't go across my small intestine into my bloodstream. Amino acids do. And so the first thing that has to happen is I have to break these bonds apart between the amino acids and break them into di and tripeptide bonds. So there's 2 and 3 chunks of amino acids. Then they can filter across the small intestine. Well, if I take anything, if I take a piece of paper and I break it in half, that took energy, so that part of the digestion requires my body to use some energy to break down the 100 calories before it can be absorbed. So already it's a little less than 100 true calories at that point. There's no violation of thermodynamics. It's just that my body had to break those bonds, which takes energy. And the next step is then those amino acids are floating around. If there's a need to synthesize muscle tissue, or if there's organ damage, or normal protein turnover, and the body has to use those amino acids for that, then boom, that happens. But most of the protein that doesn't happen, it has to go through another phase because those amino acids will float around, and you can't have high amino acid. That's kind of an acidic amino acid. Amines are positively charged. It's like an acidic environment. Your body has to convert them to another thing, and it's the same thing like building blocks. If I have a bunch of blocks and they're shaped in the form of an A, like amino acid, now I need to turn them into glucose. It's called gluconeogenesis. It's a descriptive name: glucose, neo, new, genesis, create. So you're creating new glucose from the amino acids. If I have the block of A's and I turn them into a C, that took some energy. So now that's another little change in energy. And then also those, not all of those carbohydrates will get utilized or stored as glycogen, and some of them will go through a process through the fatty acid synthesis pathway where that same thing will be happening. Now that C gets turned into an F, which takes a little more energy. And so that's one of the ways people get confused by it. But mostly people just don't believe it because they miscount calories. And that's really intriguing, actually, because uh, study after study after study shows how horrible people are at tracking their true caloric intake, even when the food label is there, and even disregarding the fact that the food label is only precise to so much. They did a big thing like that, I think, in the UK. Oh man, it was like 15 years ago now, like a television show, and it was, they had overweight people and thin people, but it was across the board. Thin people overestimated the calories they ate by like 20 or 30%, where they would only be eating 12 or 1,300 calories and they would say 2,000 or 2,200. And the overweight people would do the opposite in an even higher amount. They'd underestimate by like 50%, where they say they only ate 1,800 calories and really they ate 3,000 calories, you know. And so it's calories in versus calories out is not, it's not an option. I wish it was, because then I mean, we have propane here and we have a big house. We pay like 1,200 a month for that stupid propane. We got 6 people living here. I would love to save that money by just snapping my fingers and creating free energy, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's a ton to unpack there. And I love this stuff. So this is great for me. And but with that, so I think one thing is obviously protein is very satiating as well. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think that's due to breaking it down? Does that cause you to use more energy? Would that make it more satiating? I've always wondered like kind of where that comes from.
That's a really good question. I haven't put much thought into it. This is a good conversation though, because uh, people always ask me what book should they read to understand, nutrition, and I always say college textbooks, because when you understand human physiology and human digestion and all those things, you don't have to like read this. We can learn it by what we know about the body, and so I haven't really thought about this, but if you sat and thought about it, you could work out from first principles the reason protein is more satiating. What most likely it is probably the fact that if you eat fat, it really, you either use it as a fat source for energy or you store it as a fat source. And so that's it. Carbohydrates, they're in spike in energy. They either get stored as glycogen or used as energy, or really quickly go through a fatty acid synthesis. Protein sticks around a long time. First, right away, we can't even utilize it as it is. We already have, and we have to break carbohydrates down also, because carbohydrates have to be broken to simple sugars. But already we have to break them apart. That takes time. That's, so we've eaten the food as it's going through. It doesn't just go right away to disperse to the body. It has to go through a process that takes some time. And then those amino acids are floating around, and they're an energy source, possibly supplying certain energy needs if we have needs for muscle protein synthesis or needs for repairing damaged tissue. And then it goes through another process, and it goes through all of the body all over again, now as glucose, and then it goes through the process all over again as fatty acids. And so it just sticks with you so long that you really get your biggest bang for your buck. And there's other things also, that there's only 2 essential nutrients. We need 2 foods to survive: essential amino acids and essential fatty acids. We don't ever have to eat a carbohydrate. There's no essential carbohydrate. And so the minimum requirement for life essentially is what you could argue like organ meat, but like a meat protein source with fatty acids, like not pure protein. And so you also have the fact that it is the minimum requirement to sustain life. So you have that combined with the fact that it basically goes through 3 laps around the energy circuit before it's all utilized up. you can see why it would, give you the most satiety and last the longest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As you were saying that, I even thought of it. It's like exactly like fat's like a one lane highway
Yep.
where carbs would be two, and then a major
Yeah.
highway would be protein, basically.
Yeah, or you could even like, like you go and pay for a go-kart ride at the fair or whatever, and fats, you get one lap around the track, carbohydrates, you get two, and protein, you get three, so obviously you're going to get, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so based off what you just said there as well, is like obviously the only two macronutrients we really need to survive is fat and protein. Therefore, people would just jump to the conclusion, well, why don't we go carnivore? Why don't we go, and carnivore again, like you said, would have to be like head to tail of an animal, I'm assuming, to get all the fats needed. But and then why don't we go keto? I feel like is people's next conclusion. And how do you kind of combat that? And then I guess that would also branch right into how would you structure someone that's just a lifestyle client as
Mhm.
far as a balance?
So why don't we do keto or carnivore? You can, and there's a number of reasons. One, what's minimally required to survive is different than what's easiest to follow or most, energy helpful to follow. And so I have no problem with. I'm not really a fan of keto because true keto is really just really low protein and high fat. And keto drives me crazy because yes, you're burning more fat, but you don't. That doesn't mean you're still. It's still 100% bound by thermodynamics. The only fat you burn from your body is how many your caloric deficit. Whatever diet you're in, if you're in 1,000 calorie deficit, you lose 1,000 calories from the body. Whether it's keto, whether it's carnivore, whether it's high carb, it doesn't matter. The reason yes, you burn more fat on keto, but that's because you're eating more fat, so that's
Yeah,
always been my pet peeve with that, when people are like, yeah, I'm burning fat primarily. Well, yeah, but you only burn fat from the body if you eat less calories than you burn. It doesn't matter. Yes, you're burning more fat because that's what you're eating, but the reason you don't is a couple of reasons. For my clients, or for like the typical like extreme performance athlete, it's probably not optimal for performance. Carbohydrates, the glycolysis pathway is a better energy source for most sport type performance activities. Fat provides more energy, but it's hard to get that ATP, and it's not as easy to use, so you don't, it's you get more energy out of each chunk of fat than you do from carbohydrates. But if you're running a marathon, or well, marathon's a bad example. If you're lifting weights or doing like playing football, you want glucose available for a quick, easy glycolysis pathway, because that's the best energy source for the type of actions you'll be doing in those sports. Now, for the general public, why don't you do carnivore and keto? Is because you're a normal person and you're going to have work events, you're going to have birthday parties, you're going to have holidays, you're going to have invitations to go drink beer, you're going to have Super Bowl parties. And it just, when you have diets like that, especially keto, when you're relying on being in ketosis, and eating one meal off plan can kick you out of ketosis, you don't get to have a life, And the type of person who's on ketosis because they're overweight and really wants to change, how they probably, that's not like a 3 week change, that's, people don't, it's hard to burn body fat. Burning 2 pounds of fat a week is 1,000 calorie daily deficit. When you consider the average woman might have a 15 to 1,800 calorie metabolism, so to burn 2 pounds of fat a week, she can only eat 500 or 800 calories a day.
crazy.
So yeah, and that's 2 pounds. Most people need to lose 50, 60, 70 pounds. So you're gonna have to be on this diet for months and months and months, and it doesn't work when someone brings cookies into work, or there's a birthday celebration at work, or your kids have a birthday, or the Super Bowl, or it's Christmas, or barbecues in the summer. And so that's really for the average population. But it's so frustrating because it's not hard. There are better choices, and the reason is because the reason there's all these fad diets and stuff is because people want something quick and easy. Shysters and charlatans and con men know how to manipulate that, and people want to believe in magic, But
Sure.
really, what I always say is, I call it the pick it, kill it, grow it diet. It's almost self-regulating, where if you only choose foods that you could pick from a tree, grow in your garden, or hunt for meat, you can more or less eat to your appetite. And because most people eat to their appetite, most people don't eat more than they burn. Most people eat up within 100 calories a day of their true metabolism, and so if you if you do that, but from better food choices that aren't processed, aren't loaded with, because when you start adding sugars into products, you know, I'm like not forming clear thoughts here, but like if you like apple juice, you can drink 100 grams of carbs from apple juice. A Granny Smith apple has like 15 grams of carbs. Eating 8 Granny Smith apples is going to leave you really full. Drinking a glass of apple juice, 20 minutes later, you're ready to eat. You might even be hungrier from the spike of insulin. So if you just stick to pick it, kill it, grow it, you really don't have to track much of anything. Your appetite will kind of just allow you. And that's really in the short term, probably why things like carnivore work so well, is because it's just meat. So the food's, I mean, meat good. I mean, steak's really good, but
Right.
it's not like, like you got to cook it. You can't just go grab a bag of chips for some steak. And so you're going to reach a certain level of hunger before you're even going to take the initiative to cook the meat. And then you're not going to snack and nibble. You don't cook one bite of steak like you would grab one brownie or something. And so really, the things like carnivore, it just forces you into allowing your own appetite to actually dictate what you eat, like humans, we're meant to.
Right. It almost so it sounds like kind of like flexible dieting is really the way to go, right? Where you work in the sweets or processed foods occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
And something else you touched on that I think is funny is that it's people do. They tend to eat to their, I guess, how whenever they're satiated or their calorie limit, even if they're eating whatever they want, and that could be processed food majority of the time. The
Mm-hmm.
people that don't tend to eat to their limit are the people that are super fixated on it and
Mm-hmm.
can't seem to figure it out. And it's so funny because it's the people that care but can't do it.
Yeah, well, and we kind of do it to ourselves, like because we teach our kids, we don't let our kids self-regulate. Used to be easier because you like 100 years ago, what did you have, like oatmeal, potatoes, whole grains of rice, real beef, and so like meals were like you had to prepare the meal. Now you throw something in the oven, chicken nuggets, so it's a little bit easier. But some interesting things are like people talk about the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas. The average American, people always, if you ask someone, how much does the average American gain over the holidays? They'll say 10 pounds. It's not, it's 1 pound. That's it. But the average American never loses that pound, And so, I'm 43. In 20 years, I'll be 63. If you consider adulthood starting at age 20, that's 43 years that I've done that. That's 43 pounds. And so that is what most people are by their 60 are 40 pounds overweight, 45 pounds overweight. And that's just from that 1 pound on the holidays. You have vacations. Most people will probably gain a half a pound on a vacation. You have that every year. So you got 1.5 pounds a year. Over summer, like the barbecues and things like that, there's another point when you might get another half. And so just right there, 2 pounds a year, that's it from those two little things. Now after, at 65, now that's 90 pounds, and that, so if I was if I was 200 pounds at age 20, now I'm 290 pounds and I'm a big fat, guy about ready to retire, which is typically what it is.
So, so true. It's just compounding, really is what it comes down to.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. Like, you always hear about compounding interest in like the stock market and
Yeah,
stuff. It's like all people need to do is look at their bodies. That's compound interest of body fat. Maybe people would be
absolutely.
more inclined to invest if they thought of it that way.
So true. And so I run myself. I do like marathons and I lift. How would you kind of structure a meal plan for someone like that? Like I can just tell you like lay out really quick. I eat carbs pre-gym, I eat carbs pre-run. And then obviously I try and get my protein in after events. I get a little bit of carbs in as well. But how would you kind of structure it for someone that wants to be considered they consider it like a hybrid athlete?
It's tough with hybrid with like strength and endurance.
Right.
Like something like CrossFit, which is like endurance, but it's glycolytic endurance. They're short, they're high heart rate, high intensity. It's definitely a type of endurance, but it's different than like the true oxidative energy pathways of long distance running. It's difficult doing that with strength because they are two separate worlds. I mean, they
Fight
really
yourself.
are.
Yeah.
But so typically, what I would recommend is it's hard because for the weight training to make progress in the gym, you want to eat kind of not necessarily after the training, but you don't eat in preparation for the weight workouts because how good of a workout you have is very loosely correlated to the results of the workout. The results of the workout are much more tightly correlated to the food you eat during the repair process. And so like if to really simplify it, like if I had a high carb day, that's like my big calorie day. As a bodybuilder, we would have that on the day we train, like a body part we're trying to bring up. Say I'm trying to bring up my back. I would have all those calories on that day, not before. You'd think you'd want them the day before, so you have all that glycogen energy, but we don't want to do that because we don't. How much muscle growth we get from the workout is really not very closely dependent on how good the workout was. Even most of us train more than sufficiently enough to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. We fail and then in supplying the nutrients for that. So we would want all the food on the back day. Now, as a long distance runner, that's the worst thing you can do.
Right.
Because you're no way you're gonna run a marathon if you didn't eat carbs the day before, and there's no way you're gonna finish that marathon if your insulin levels are spiked all day because you're shoving in carbs during a marathon, you know. And so for like performance based things like that, you would want the carbs before the event so that you have the glycogen stored and allows you to utilize that stored energy during the event. So it's very difficult because they're just like two almost mutually exclusive energy pathways. But I mean, I see it more and more as because my client list is slightly aging a little bit as I age, and a lot of like middle-aged people are now getting into more endurance type stuff. And so we'll work it so that our higher calorie days will be on a weight training day, uh, but before like the day before their longest run of the week or whatever, you know. And then if if it's an event, like they're actually running an event, a marathon or a 5K or whatever, then we will place the high day on a rest day the day before the event.
Yeah, makes total sense. And something that was coming to my mind is so obviously you've went through a ton of schooling. You're a doctor, correct?
No, I know it's I completed the PhD coursework in physics,
Okay.
but it's a kind of, I'll try to tell a story really quick. I realized liked math and physics, and I went back to school for it late in life, 29 or 30 when I went back, and I was doing my research, and I kind of realized I was never going to make an important contribution to physics. It just, like there's I loved it, but there's some like how deep some people think about things is mind blowing. It's like I don't even know how they're humans. There were two people that went through my university, a guy named Guyton and a girl named Katrina, who were just incredibly deep thinkers. Like things that you have to really sit and because you have to analyze like physics problems really deeply because they're generally pretty counterintuitive. And the things that you could work through, you could get to it, but they were just immediately available to them, made me realize that, like I didn't want. I was gonna be a cog in some research wheel and maybe teach at a small college. And
Right.
so my professor one day, like, kind of to encourage me, patted me on the back, said, You're doing really good. Your research is really coming along. You'd have enough for a master's thesis." It kind of encouraging me, like, you're getting there. And I thought, master's thesis. So I went to the registrars that week and applied for my master's and just bolted. Uh, so I completed the PhD coursework, but I never passed the comprehensive and never finished because the PhD thesis research is more has higher requirements than master's thesis research.
Okay. No, because what I was going to say is obviously like you're obviously a big dude and you've been into lifting for a while. So how did you kind of shed the identity of like, now you're studying physics? Like, did you have any personal like identity issues with like shedding that, or even how, people tend to put these labels on us? I'm sure that was
Oh, I'm
not an
sure.
easy
Yeah,
transition.
yeah. I'm sure people probably thought I was a dumb meathead. I think it was probably like a intriguing anomaly when I went back to physics and did really well out of the gate. I mean, there's not much you can do. Like there's really nothing you can do because go read the comments on. Well, if you post this, read the comments. Someone's gonna say, that fat ass. We're supposed to take nutrition advice from him. I'm 43 years old. I'm past that age. Like I'm running 4 businesses. Being ripped isn't my thing anymore. But it is what it is. Like I try not. Some people experience real prejudice, and discrimination, and so I try to like the stuff I experience is just you know miseducation. It's just people being dumb. I try not
Right.
to let it really put too much thought into it. It's because it's not what the real prejudice some people experience.
Absolutely. And the last question I always end it with is like, what keeps you going? Like, what's your drive? Where does that kind of come
And
from?
progress, I think, I don't know. You know what? I really don't. I absolutely love. I'm addicted to progress, like unhealthily. Where like right now I'm trying to play pool, and it's like I dream about it. It's all I can think about, and I did that with guitar. I did that with piano. I did that with math. I did that with physics. There's like an S curve of progress. You start learning something and you hardly make any progress, and you really start making progress, and then you get pretty good at it. And then getting even better is really hard, and then it trails off. Somewhere at that end, when the progress starts not really happening anymore, I kind of lose interest. But I think that's what it is. I just absolutely love a new thing. I don't know anything about it. It's this whole world that I don't know exists, and I get to immerse myself in it, and I love making that progress. And then I'm just always looking for ways to do that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, it seems like you've done a ton of things, and it's kind of like you said, it's kind of just like mastering that thing, and then yeah, you move on to something else, and it's
Yeah,
like self exploration.
I wish I could stick to one and really master something, but I'm just not wired that way.
I gotcha. But I really, really appreciate your time, man. I hope you have a great day, and I appreciate the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, man.